Back
Fade
to
to Black.
Yeah, man.
First Fright. Zimmerman.
Zimmerman.
Yeah, only
now,
Fright.
I was gonna
Only
say,
Fright.
I don't think he did any other horror. I think this was it.
Well,
Who
he does not believe this is a horror film, and
Which is interesting.
and I actually sort of don't either. So I can't wait to talk about that. But yeah, I think this was his only horror film, I guess.
This is Eric. Eric Binford.
Double-crossing squealers, both of you.
I go to a lot of movies. It's my thing.
You know what I do to squealers?
Why don't you live in the real world with the rest of us?
If you're so smart, Stella, tell me what James Cagney's name was in White Heat.
Binford he's sick in the head. He's like retarded or something.
Here's to us, top of the world.
Eric Binford lives for the movies. Sometimes he kills for them too. Dennis Christopher, star of Breaking Away, creates an unforgettable portrait of life on the edge of terror.
But Fade to Black came out in a great time. I mean, it's 1980 release, right?
1980.
But Irwin Yablans is the producer, and he's coming off Halloween. And so whatever Zimmerman wanted to do with Fade to Black, they were going to put some slasher elements into it, because Irwin, I'm sure, would have been like, look, this is what's working right now.
These are my notes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's right, exactly.
yeah.
In fact, the reason, and we'll get into it, but the reason that the actress who looks like Marilyn Monroe is even in the movie is because Irwin met her at a party.
Yeah, and
then
she's
the
a
script,
Marilyn
and then the
Monroe.
script had to
Freaking dead
be
ringer.
rewritten. But
Well,
anyways,
she's an impersonator. That's what she did.
Yeah.
but
Australian?
anyways, yeah. But it's definitely a movie worth dissecting, because it does have elements of a lot of different stuff in it.
Totally.
You know?
It's not just a singular horror movie.
No,
There's
no.
a lot going on.
And it's one of those films that makes you be like, why do I put names on anything?
Totally.
Because this movie makes you
It
feel
genre
a lot
hops
of
a little
different
bit.
things, right?
Yeah.
These are one of these mail-in Netflix things where I finally found it. You know,
Nice.
finally.
Came in the little red envelope. Or
Because it was
yeah.
notoriously like not available
Not
for legal reasons.
Yes, mostly legal, and also I guess whoever produced the movie just kind of tanked or whatever. But
Who would have thought having 1 billion movie references would eventually catch up with you?
yeah.
yeah. I mean, they got sued 2 months after it got released, so that was
Right.
a big bummer.
For specifically for the Hopalong Cassidy.
the
stuff,
cowboy
right?
scene, which is
And
one
also-
of the best scenes
Yeah.
in the movie. Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
a great. So this is a movie about movies in a way, and our character. Played by
wonderfully
Dennis
Christopher.
Yeah.
from Breaking Away.
Away.
Yeah.
Love that
Breaking
guy.
Away, yeah.
Signorina, you, he's yours, no?
You mean you've been chasing me with this?
He's nothing. Niente, signorina.
What are you, exchange student or something?
Si. I am Italiano. My name is Enrico Gimondi.
So he shot
You know.
Breaking
Chariots of
Away
Fire.
right before this movie,
Yeah,
which
makes
is
sense.
like a total yin yang, like totally different character
Yeah.
he's playing in
Right.
this movie.
This dude was also in Roma. He worked with Fellini. He worked with Tarantino.
Django Unchained,
He
yeah.
worked with Carpenter. He worked with Peter Yates. He worked with like massive,
And I can
massive
see
directors.
why he worked with them, because
plays
he is
adult Eddie.
incredibly talented.
Yeah.
This performance is incredible.
Incredible.
Tarantino casted him in Django,
Django.
and was like, "I'm actually a huge fan of yours."
Yeah,
and
I can believe
as
it.
soon as he locked him in Django,
Right.
he like rearranged his part because he knew what he was capable of.
Right.
Yeah.
So he like
Yeah.
wrote all this different extra stuff for him.
That's
like,
so
specifically
cool.
Because
Yeah.
he's so cool.
You know, and yet, in a way, his visage of a character is not unique to me, because to me, he is Roddy McDowall. Like, to me, everything about Dennis Christopher is Roddy McDowall.
Yeah.
And this character, where he's playing somebody who's slightly warped, who maybe has some multiple personality things going on.
Warping.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
me, I've always thought that the one actor who could have played Norman Bates other than Anthony Perkins would have been Roddy McDowall. And so to me, in Fade to Black, it is Roddy McDowall playing Anthony Perkins in Psycho, played by Dennis Christopher.
Yeah.
Because physically, he looks just like Roddy McDowall.
Yeah.
And his facial expressions and the way he emotes like disappointment or confusion, it's completely Roddy McDowall. And I mean that as a compliment.
It breaks through any makeup he puts on himself.
It does.
It comes through. He's so emotive.
Yeah, and again, that is a compliment because Roddy McDowall is incredible. Dennis Christopher is incredible, and really just chews up this role. Dennis
Christopher might be. I mean, this is such an underrated performance. Like, no one talks about this performance or this movie, really. And yeah, it rests on his shoulders. I'm not saying anything. Everyone's great in this movie, but I'm just saying, like, this, like,
he carries this film.
He carries it, and he is the champion of this movie. He's the MVP, let's say.
He carries it well.
Oh my God, dude! I mean, it starts where like you really feel sorry for him in the beginning, you know, until he makes his first murder. You're like, okay, he went over the board, but like. Up until then, you just feel sorry for him. His existence is so sad, and like, you know, that aunt character is so awful and just a gross person. And I love her backstory about being like a failed dancer, and she had to take care of this little shit, and just like.
And his mother apparently was an actor who got pregnant, and
the twist is, you know, she's
exactly,
which is great.
But in a way, his character. Is a character that we all know.
Yeah.
And maybe even can relate to.
That's why
it's a character, right? It's a character that lives their life through the movies.
Yeah.
Because reality just isn't good enough.
And did you notice that
it sucks?
Yeah. Did you notice that in his bedroom even, above his bed, it's like a marquee almost? The way the neon light looks.
Dude, bounce off that fucking jerk off scene is like so sad.
Dude.
And the camera just going away from him to that thing. I'm like, that's probably one of the saddest fucking jerk off scenes I've ever seen.
To be honest with you, it made me not want to jerk off anymore because, because I feel like most jerk-offs are sad in a way.
Well, it's after. It's after.
It's that moment where all the chemicals have been released in your brain, and then you're reminded you're
just sitting there with your hand in your boxers. And you're almost that close to crying. It made me think.
No, I get it.
It made me think.
Me and my friends in high school used to joke about that. It's like, you know, you're in the morning, you're waiting on the bus, you're like, well, I can crank one out real quick, and then you do it, and you go, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, I'm just an animal.
Waiting on the bus, you're at the bus stop.
Yeah, just like, fuck.
Yeah, and that is Dennis Christopher's character in this film because he's living life, he's doing things like trying to hook up or trying to, like, whatever he's trying to do, he tries to do it in a way to where he fails.
Yeah.
And then he imagines
a fantasy.
A fantasy that he's getting through the movies of what that would be like if it worked out.
Yeah.
And sometimes he imagines
it
before he tries.
It
always works out.
That's
right.
Even within the first 15 minutes of the movie, and you realize when he becomes uncomfortable around his aunt or his mom, he already goes in that Cagney impression because he just wants to escape his reality right then and there. He's like, I'm gonna go into this move, and even she kind of like plays along like briefly with it. But I just thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like immediately when he feels uncomfortable, he kind of goes into that escape world. Even when he is crushing on the girl in the diner, like he immediately is going into a dreamlike, scenario.
It's very Michael Jackson, like in real life, like Michael Jackson, like reverting into like childlike stuff and building Wonderland and just trying to protect himself from the real world. So is this guy by watching his movies, setting up a 16mm projector in his room. He's just trying to build a wall of VHS to protect him from the outside world. And his job is related to film.
Which is incredible.
Great.
Which those scenes are incredible because they're clearly shot in a distribution warehouse.
Yeah.
You're
He's
really
on the worst
seeing
part of filmmaking, the only business side of filmmaking, on that side of it, where it's like, it's just to generate dollars.
Yeah.
There's no like artistry,
no
there's
passion.
No artistry left.
Yeah.
All the creative parts of the whole process are behind it.
Yeah.
So he's just in like the meat grinder part, and you could tell it eats at him because he's still passionate. But the funny thing is they like film at this place. They got the tourist trap poster and some other
the Halloween
posters
poster.
up.
Anything that Yablans is like.
Yeah, exactly.
But as much as we love film, you really get a real taste for what film distribution was like, and specifically the actual act of getting film to theaters.
Yeah.
These huge canisters had to be stored.
Yeah.
They had to be shipped. They had to be organized.
You get a real look at it.
You get a real look at it and see how much space and work and time that took. And it's no surprise that they dropped that as soon as they could, even though we longed for that. Yeah. But that is a real unique, candid look at that stuff, you know.
And him and his character and how that's designed is he loathes that place. Like, no one treats him with respect already.
Yeah.
But the whole like business side and not having any kind of interest like to him, like he probably got the job thinking, you know, it's kind of like when you're young, you get a job at a movie theater thinking, oh, I'm like, this is my way into the industry.
Video store? You work at a video store?
You know, but then you find out it's all just about cleaning popcorn and taking tickets. You know,
no one cares.
There's nothing, you're invisible.
Right.
And I think he keeps falling into these like traps where he becomes invisible until, like you said, he experiences a couple fantasies and experiences a couple instances where he gets power and power is actually delivered to him.
Yeah.
And what he does with it is it drives him insane because he's not ready for it.
Yeah, and the only power he can really gain is when he's the only one involved and in control of it. Because the fantasy world that he builds up, the minute it crumbles in front of us when he approaches the girl who looks like Marilyn Monroe, and or no, after that exactly. Sorry about that. When she doesn't show up for their date.
Yeah, which you feel
That's really the linchpin. Or
it's the
linchpin.
Point. It's the breaking down of the fantasy.
Yeah.
I forgot. I was supposed to meet this guy in Westwood hours ago.
Everything was
that
working out.
sends him down into a world where he has to go and kind of turn up a notch of his control over the fantasy.
But even still, then I felt great sympathy with him because we've
all been there.
Yeah, but then you also have like some sympathy for the girl too because she's trying to get there. She realizes what's happening, and she feels bad.
It's just reality.
You know? It's how it happens, you know. But it's like that is the domino. That's the first domino to go to where it's all
dominoes.
Right,
dude.
But
God.
And then the whole power structure, you know, him losing power in that scenario, and then him trying to gain power with his aunt.
Right.
And then all these different scenarios where he's then set up with his antagonists, who are movie-like in his mind, and he becomes more and more demented with each one, and those kills become more and more fantasy and interesting to us as viewers. But to him, they're just like even deeper into his like fantasy world, which is built on movies, which makes it all the more fascinating because we can recognize his fantasies as moviegoers, and know exactly what he's talking about, exactly what he's dressed up as, exactly what he's gonna do because he's dressed up like that person. You know, starting with the Dracula attack, which is
so cool.
So this is part of a group of films that I'm personally surprised there's not more of them.
Yeah.
But it's the Fade of the Black. I wouldn't really call Fade of the Black a slasher, but it's a killer movie where the killer wears multiple costumes.
Which we've talked about this in the past.
So we talked about Theater of Blood.
Yeah.
We talked about Terror Train.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of others. But for whatever reason, all of them I personally really like. They seem to, the ones that have been done seem to really work, and this one is no different. It really lends itself to the enjoyment, the lack of boredom you have when you're watching this movie. It's an ever-changing world of fantasies that this guy's going through.
When Leatherface puts makeup on, like that kind of shit, it's like, what is this now?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, there's some androgyny.
It's taking that step a little further. It's like it's not just a killer in a mask. He's gonna change it up.
He's multiple
and he's killing them in the way that character would kill that person.
He's acting out fantasy.
To the point, with the Dracula scene, you know, the girl dies and he bends down and takes a big gulp of the blood. And actually, it's a really eerie scene when he rises up with that white makeup and his face is just kind of like mucked up with the blood.
Yes.
You're like, dude, you have crossed the line now into a place where there is no coming back.
There's no more
from
sympathy
this.
for you anymore.
Yeah.
I think the character is well designed in that you can tell he's gone through a lot of trauma.
Yeah. Yes.
And the mental illness as a result of all that trauma is really what broke
he's like a child. He's like a child in the movie.
He's
until he
repressed.
finally throws his tantrum.
And if you've lived in the movie since you were a kid, you tend to be a
have
little bit more
anymore.
Stunted. You don't have a reality.
Or a gauge on reality.
Yes.
Your barometer is all fucked up.
Exactly.
And that element of the story is maybe the first thing that kind of like challenges any genre you want to put in this film. Because I don't know what Zimmerman was thinking when he started this. I'm sure that the producers wanted to push him into more horror, but I could see this film having not been about kills, and then the kills were kind of implanted in. They all work really well.
Yeah, it definitely leans.
But it almost doesn't need the kills.
It almost doesn't need it.
Because
it's a story about trauma.
It's just me reading into it a little bit, but I like the title as like a double meaning, like Fade to Black is a movie thing, but fade, like the whole movie is kind of this decline, this fade to
his mental
death.
decline.
You know, he just at each turn he just goes deeper into the fantasy.
Yeah.
And he even like this is a credit to his acting, but the more kills he has under his belt, the more deranged, the more dead in his eyes. Like, which I'm not saying like he thought about that like as an actor each time, but it really you really feel like he's like becoming more and more of a shell of who he used to be in the earlier part of the movie.
The power has like eaten his brain.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, and I will say that, but okay, so going back to you saying it's not a straight horror movie, I get that.
Yeah.
And you know, in a way, and I was talking to Travis about this earlier. It's interesting because this is one of the few. I do consider this a horror movie. I do, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the few horror movies that Roger Ebert gave a glowing review. And I'm not saying he's like the know-all, but
I think that's a sign that it's not that horror.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but his review though of it. It's all horror. Like what he's saying is horror, but it's so well done.
I think I know why he liked it too, because it's essentially an autobiography of him.
This is, however you want to break things down. This film, film gives you tastes of horror.
Yeah,
I think it's more of a thriller.
Yeah, definitely a psychological.
I don't think
thriller.
that it's someone who likes to watch Friday the 13th. I would recommend this film for them.
Totally.
I think it's more like a psychological breakdown.
Yeah.
And fans of movies,
right?
Fans of creative writing,
yes.
that kind of stuff in a scary package.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, it's definitely. I would definitely say it's a psychological thriller for sure.
It is everything.
Yeah.
Which again,
but it's got horror icons in it, so horror fans will dig it in a different way.
It's like I don't even want to say that it's not horror. It's just the fact that it is so many things.
Yeah.
And not one thing.
It's more of like the result of horror.
Yeah.
It's like,
but
you know,
in a different package.
Yes.
You know when you see a movie sometimes and they don't have a specific label for it, so they just call it drama? Like you've seen that, right? Like we're like,
well, there needs to be. If Blockbuster was still around, I would argue for a horror section and a trauma section. You know, because there's all this A24 is like going after. They're trying to water down horror and essentially make trauma horror movies.
Yeah.
When they're totally different pictures. They're totally they come from a mental illness side. And yeah, you can have a psycho killer and like what we just talked about with Stage Fright.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a psycho killer and everything, but if you're gonna dive into that mental illness and what it's all about and what started that trauma and all that stuff, that's a different type of movie than what's traditionally packaged in the horror section. So if we could do Blockbuster all over again, there would be psychological thrillers, and that would be a subgenre of trauma.
Right.
You know, and horror would be right next to trauma, and they would be like two different
it's not like a film like Monster would be put in the horror section, right?
Right.
But it's also good enough of a film to not even be placed in a box.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think that's the point, right?
Yeah.
It's super good.
This is something I'd recommend to people. Again, going to your point, I would say I'd recommend this to people who aren't even familiar with horror very much. I was like, just check this one out.
If you're into really
movies.
into movies,
and
maybe that's the point of the genre switching.
It's a wide net. It casts a wide net.
He's switching fantasies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a fan of multiple different kinds of movies, so we have old school, like Golden
White
Age
Heat.
films, White Heat,
James that is
Cagney.
not a horror movie.
No,
that is not
at all.
That is not,
but it's got the Universal monsters in there, and they get screen time.
Yeah.
I mean, major
okay, so
screen time with
what do you guys
costumes
think about? Because I personally like it, but I can see people not liking it. It's a little jarring. What do you guys think about the flashbacks to the actual Universal movies? Because I actually like that stuff.
That shows what's going on in his mind more than like, oh, let's look at this clip he's referencing.
Right, and I also think it's maybe a quick cliff notes to anyone watching the movie who's not aware of the references.
It's helpful, but I think that's secondary to it being like this is a visual of what he sees. It's almost like RoboCop vision of what's happening.
Because for instance, he's got the Old West thing, which was a creepy look.
Yes.
When I saw that, I actually didn't know that was supposed to be Hopalong Cassidy. But yet it was still super effective, right?
Hopalong Cassidy. Oh, look at this. You want to play games? This is some toy you got here, Hoppy.
Make your move, hombre.
Well, I think he's crazy.
You want to talk about Tim Thomerson?
Yes, dude. Okay, that is my second note. I was like, okay, so first of all, this is our secondary protagonist, let's say, I guess.
You know, that Binford kid was a little strange.
Maybe third.
Doll Man, baby.
All I know is because it's been a while since I've seen this movie, so when I put it on the other night, and I'm watching it, and he's in his office, and he just pulls out the harmonica and starts wailing on it, and I was like, okay, yeah, I like this guy. Like, his character's a throwaway character in a way,
and he almost knows it.
Yes,
I feel like a lot of his performances in his movies, you know, if you don't get what he's putting down, they can be kind of written off as cheesy or gay or dumb, whatever. But anything he brings to the movies is always such a wacky choice.
It's so good.
That it's so good.
It has an authenticity to it.
Yes. So when he's wailing on that and she's just laughing at him, she's like, oh my God, this dummy.
What Albert Pune does with him in Doll Man is some of the wildest acting and wildest fucking shit.
From that office scene, and then when he's in bed with his girlfriend and they're just talking. And
the Ritz crackers.
Dude, I was fucking dying laughing the way it ends.
Or before that, when she sees him from afar in the locker and he's fucking playing harmonica doing cocaine, I think.
Yes, he does little snorts.
He saves those scenes because this is one of those films that for whatever reason, and most of the times this ruins a lot of these
detective storyline.
The sort of detective side storyline that gets shoved into the movie. And quite frankly, in this movie, it seems as out of place as it is ever seen. But yet,
it works.
The performance that you guys are talking about, because he is so good at what he's doing.
I think he's so goddamn likable.
He doesn't know what movie he's in.
He doesn't. They may not have told him.
He doesn't have any scenes with Christopher or any scenes with anyone else.
No.
And so he's just fucking like doing a procedural in his weird ass way. And they're having a ball. And then when he shows up at the end, it all works out because he's in the theater and he's bringing what he's been working on. They're bringing what they've been working on, and the movies collide. Even though his movie is like a 1 minute
That's right,
short
because
film.
Technically he's a reporter or a journalist. He's not a cop. But he plays like one, which
it's
is
kind of hard to figure out what's going on there for a moment.
Yeah. And they like give him a desk in the basement or some
shit. It's got
shit.
bars for doors.
And honestly, going back to the throwaway thing, this is a trope that unfortunately even movies today and movies we revere that are in the slasher genre especially, they always have that secondary storyline where it's a detective or a cop or whatever.
And sometimes it eats up more than just
sometimes
secondary.
they become the protagonist. And the villain is reduced.
And sometimes it's again, sometimes it's great, it's well thought out. And sometimes, even the movies that I love, it turns into a slog every time they come on.
A lot of times it's done for padding.
A
lot of times it's done for padding. And it makes me wonder here whether it wasn't also done for padding.
But for some reason it backfired in a way, in a good way.
They keep it short.
It is.
Scenes are micro.
It doesn't ruin it. It doesn't ruin it.
No.
You know.
And when he shows up at the end, it all makes sense. And it's not like they just drop a new person in the show.
Right.
So it helps. You know, those little things
also,
are peppered.
because of the theme of Fade to Black, that we're basically taking themes from all these different films, it almost makes sense that we're also throwing in this trope, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it works that way.
And how about that, one thing they threw at us that I totally forgot is old Mickey Rourke. Yeah, this
That's
is the time when he had his first face. Mickey Rourke, handsome gentleman,
handsome guy. But you could tell he's had acting ability his whole life.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, dude.
I think this is his second movie
ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Yeah. So like,
he's great in it.
He's bringing the goods. You hate him. You're like, this fucking dickhead.
And you're like, and you can tell he's a mile ahead of everyone almost, except for Christopher.
Yeah.
You know,
totally.
You could just.
He's on that
feel
caliber.
It. Yeah.
Totally.
You can see the star power there. Yeah.
Huh? Cut it out! What are you gonna do, you little baby? Huh? He does not. You little shithead.
You almost get this vibe, like, which makes it feel really real, is that something could go wrong at any moment. Like, in other words, while he's about to kill somebody, the gun might not go off, or he could trip, or his makeup,
because he's in the real world.
Yeah.
It's like he's in a fantasy, but the world isn't.
That's right. Yeah.
And he is kind of like I mean, he's not like clumsy or anything, but he's kind of a dork. So it's like you feel like he's gonna trip over, like you said.
Yeah, like that. Let's talk about the ending. Like the ending.
Yeah.
You know, you feel like that motherfucker's gonna fall off the fucking top of Grauman's.
Right.
Which is interesting because at that time it wasn't Grauman's. It was.
I thought it's the Chinese.
It's the Chinese theater, but at that time it was the man.
There you go.
Something.
Yeah. The
Troy
man. I remember the man part of it.
Yeah, he was an exhibitor, owned a bunch of theaters, bought it in the 70s, had it till 2001, sold it back to him. They changed the name, and then now it's TCL because the Chinese got it.
Everybody give me a thumbs up.
If you know anything about LA, you've seen the Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard.
Sure.
But beautiful inside, still beautiful at that time, even though it needed repairs then. But what a crazy, awesome,
great climactic
especially how
scene.
It's combined with White Heat.
So cool.
Just him like totally lost in his fantasy. They've got guns on, you know, they're ready to blow him away, but he's ready to kill himself.
I was gonna say he's so ready in the end when he's quoting from the movie, and then he finally falls to his death.
It's like a sweet release almost.
Yeah, it's he's finally we can end this fucking
charade.
Yes,
right.
Yeah. I'm done. I'm over this. You know.
You have to think about the mental health of someone in that kind of decline.
Oh, dude.
Usually it's like a burnout, and it's like, you know, it's rare when it's like Waco and it's 51 days long.
Right.
You know, it's more like they just like burn out and shoot up a school or whatever. And it's one day and they get shot down.
Right.
This guy's been on a murder spree. So his like mental capacity for determining what's reality and what's fiction is so gone.
Yeah.
And there's no brain left.
Right.
You know, it's been eaten alive by the movies. So it's really interesting to see him kind of like fall prey to that in the coolest location.
But also like embrace it.
It's like a Back to the Future location.
Yeah,
you know, really
like the clock
feels like
tower.
it.
Yeah, totally.
They actually shot a lot of Back to the Future on Hollywood Boulevard. There's a church on Hollywood Boulevard where they shot in their gymnasium for the Under the Sea dance. I looked through the glass one time. Right by the Hollywood Bowl.
I almost want to say the diner scene in Fade to Black. It might be the same fucking diner in Back to the Future. Because like when he's like doing the George McFly, it's almost like George McFly is talking to Leah Thompson. You know?
LA is known for that. There's a great doc. I'll put it up. I'll put a clip of it up. There's a great doc that my friend turned me on to. It's really, really long, and it's about LA locations and
cool.
shooting locations and like what LA means to.
Yeah.
Like what LA has become. It's become just a fake city that's just made to make movies.
Yeah.
And so all these locations that look like another time are just because of movies. Like they didn't ever exist before.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like these cafes and diners.
It's so funny how
much are there to rent out.
It's so crazy how many things have been filmed in LA and these locations are still reused over and over and over.
Yeah.
And you're just like, and sometimes you'll see it's pretty obvious, but most of the time, if you were to tell me this warehouse was shot in this, I'd be like, I wouldn't know, you know, because they just do such a
magic.
Right.
Yeah.
Just goes to show you, they just do such a great job of just stripping it down and building it back up again.
But it's easily the most, maybe Hong Kong's just as up there, but it's easily the most overshot city.
Oh, God.
Or in place of another city.
Yeah.
And Fade to Black takes full advantage of it, knowing that. And they actually shoot at one location that I'm sure nobody has referenced, that the movie references Murmurs by Agnes Varda. And the only reason I recognize it is because I saw it only like a few months ago. They're in front of Brindelli's Brig Cocktail is this sign, and it's a famous mural, And Murmurs is about LA murals, and she's, you know, Agnes Varda is an eccentric filmmaker, so she convinced them to like come out.
My husband Philip is not with me is because he passed away in 1978.
And it's actually, I Googled it just to see if it's still around, you know, because everything changes. And it's still there. You can go, and it's like somebody built a patio during COVID around it. So you can eat and look at that mural.
Wow.
But that's in the backdrop. You know, there's so many things that are accidentally in the backdrop because they're shooting in LA that you just can't help, like, oh, well, that's a movie reference. They didn't even think about that. You know, I love that about
it just fits so well with this movie, with everything you're saying. It's like the backdrop in his mind, and the reality he's living. It's a great movie. It's
twisted.
It's such a twisted movie.
Yeah.
You almost feel like, again, we've talked about this, and we've had articles about it on our website about the Oscars and certain films just being ignored for what they are.
Yeah.
And even though this film may have not been thought of as a horror film by its director, this is a film that really deserves something, and his performance deserves some type of recognition. You know,
it's not. If you go online and you go under like a trailer for this movie on YouTube, you'll see so many glowing praise. But it's so unfortunate that most mainstream moviegoers have no idea this movie exists.
Right, the people who know it love it.
Yeah,
and it was hard to find for a while, but now there's a great Blu-ray of it that's come out.
It's great, and I can't wait to actually go into the special features because there's a lot.
Yes,
and it's a lot. It's overwhelming,
and it deserved that kind of presentation. And I'm glad, and we're all happy that it got that. You know,
and
so
side note, the Blu-ray looks fucking great.
It looks great,
and
I will say that
really great.
Some TV prints of it and a VHS that I have was a little too dark to see everything, some of those night scenes.
Sure. That was the only way to see it for many years.
The only way to see it, yeah. So Fade to Black is one of those movies where that restoration
faded to black.
It did. It fucking sure did fade straight to black, yeah.
The script was very flawed when I first got my hands on it, and I said no immediately.